especially those parts and components for American manufacturers.
Wow.
Very important.
Fascinating. Hello, I'm Maria Hall Brown, and this is LA Currents, the Port of LA, fondly known as America's port, the busiest in North America and one of the busiest in the world. I am delighted to be joined today by the Executive Director, Gene Seroka. Thank you so much for being here, Gene.
Oh, Marie, it's great to be in studio.
Oh, good. Since 2014, that's 10 years of leading the port, so many changes that you have seen and so much growth. How does it feel to be part of that legacy for the last 10 years?
I'm the luckiest guy. Run to work every day. We've got so much to do. And yet, when we look back over the past decade, we've done so much. Our team has been together for a long time. It's a very cohesive management team. The workforce has been great. The dock workers that move all this cargo not only really dedicate their lives to this business, but dear friends as well. So it always makes it a little bit sweeter when you really like the people you work with. And I could see that here at Channel 35.
You're not kidding. We have the best team ever. All right, so let's talk about some of the things that are literally happening. Recently we had a really scary and unexpected disruption with that whole global tech outage. But the port fared quite well in that scenario, did it not?
Yeah, we did. And it's really because of the institutional knowledge we have of this workforce, the people that run the businesses, and all of us at the port. The CrowdStrike impact from last Friday was reached around the world, from banking sectors to media and businesses alike. We were fortunate because we have a business continuity plan. And what our marine terminals did, along with our truckers and railroads, is they immediately went back to old school. Let's do this manually. We got a call at, I think it was 03:30 that Friday morning to say, hey, this is happening. Let's get to business really quick. And our folks went back to clipboards and pencils and tried to serve those truckers. About 2/3 of all of our business is moved by truck. These are our first and last mile ambassadors. But what we saw was everybody rallying. And by about noon that day, just about everybody's system was back up and running, and we were more normal than we were at 03:30. But I was so proud to see how everybody came together to keep commerce moving.
So there was a plan in place just in case of something. Everybody knew how to cohesively and coherently put together Plan B.
That's right. That's right. And this is practiced every day, tabletop exercises, refresher courses, and when the real deal comes to play, our folks, it was muscle memory for a lot of these guys and ladies to keep that cargo moving.
I got to tell you, sometimes you got to have a piece of paper standing around, that's for sure. Activity at the port. Obviously, it's been the busiest year. It's way, way up, and you've termed it at early peak season. For those of us who don't quite grasp what that means, what is early peak season, and how do you interpret how that's going to play out for the next several?
Traditionally, and I would say before 2020, you would see a lot of cargo moving through ports, including ours, August, September, October, getting ready for the all-important retail year-end holidays. What we're seeing now is that May and June have become busier, and for a number of reasons. The port's business is up because the U.S. economy remains strong. The jobs market is great, lowest unemployment in over 50 years, and the American consumer continues to buy at a pace that even some experts doubted recently. But also there are a few other things happening. There's a protracted labor negotiation with dock workers on the East and Gulf Coasts. There's been drought condition in the Panama Canal for the last year. And unfortunately, the security concerns in the Red Sea because of the Houthi rebels attacking commercial ships has caused shipping lines, instead of going through the Suez Canal, to take their vessels around the Cape of Good Hope in Africa. That adds 2 to 3 weeks in transit time, millions of dollars to fuel burn, and higher prices. So because of those reasons, back last year, customers were telling me that they would fractionally move some cargo to the West Coast, and specifically Los Angeles, in case any one of those issues became more pronounced. We're seeing more and more cargo move this way. We've got a long-term dock workers contract ready for the next 5 years. Our productivity is at or better than what it was before COVID. And the level of confidence in the import and export community is at an all-time high.
So all of those issues internationally that you just spoke of, how will they affect the port do you believe in the future if those areas calm down? Do you expect things will also taper off, or do you expect that it has been so successful in regards to how we have handled it that that's going to be standard practice from this point on?
I don't know that we can rely on anything to be standard
That's
practice in the global trade arena for a variety of reasons, but we're out there beating the bushes every day. I've been to Asia 5 times this year to see customers and business partners, been to Europe once, going back again here soon. The reason is it's a people business.
Yeah.
All the technical work, the investment in infrastructure, and IT all play a big role, but it's about those relationships on the business side to give confidence to the logistics decision makers that keep the cargo driving here. Those issues will go away. There will be an East Coast labor contract. Rain and fresh water will come back into the Panama Canal. But I think a longer range issue is this security dilemma in the Red Sea. When I worked in the Middle East, we were faced with the Somali rebels that were hijacking vessels. You may remember the movie with Tom Hanks, Captain Phillips. That was a real world example of what we faced at that time. We were meeting with the NATO representation in Djibouti every 6 weeks, trying to find better ways to protect our crews and our vessels. That took some time to get under control. I think we'll see a similar scenario here. But with changing trade patterns, we're starting to see a shift of sourcing, manufacturing capabilities in Southeast Asia. Our bailiwick, our strong suit has always been North Asia. We're the fastest route between Asia and the American consumer. As we start seeing more countries like Vietnam, Indonesia, Malaysia start to build up their prominence in world trade, we start to lose that speed of transit compared to other ports. So we've got to get out there, create nonstop services with our partners, and continue to earn that cargo every day.
You're actually bringing up subjects that I hadn't even broached in my mind. Let's go back to the security issue. International waters, vast span of space and sea. Who will be ultimately responsible for the security of the transport of these ships across these waters?
This is an international responsibility. And while the Americans, the British, and several others of the Allied forces have taken leadership positions, we need everybody on this case. Suez Canal transits are down 85 to 90%. It's the second largest contributor to the Egyptian economy and the lifeblood of cargo moving from factories in Asia to the European continent and the UK, much less the United States. We've got to find a way to get this under control, but there are no less than 4 continuing and escalated problems in the Middle East that don't seem to have a clear end in sight.
You mentioned a few countries. Where are you seeing the most robust, and how does that compare to obviously our imports from China, et cetera?
Yeah, Southeast Asia is huge, and emerging markets like Vietnam, Indonesia, Malaysia, and Thailand are playing even more substantial roles than in the past. Having lived in Asia for more than a decade, we've got deep relationships that go back years, and making sure that that communication stays in the forefront is what we're trying to do today. But I'll take you back to 2022. 57% of the Port of Los Angeles' business was with China at that time. Closeout year 2023, that dropped down to about 53% of our portfolio. And now, through the first half of 2024, it's down to 43%. 43% of our business at the Port of Los Angeles is now with China, but we're still growing. So while trade policies have started to reshape what that looks like between the United States and China, we're able to pick up more cargo from emerging markets like we see in Southeast Asia. But again, the transit time, the speed to market to get from Ho Chi Minh City to Los Angeles and on to Chicago is what the import and export community looks at. We've got to continue to work on our services with our partner carriers to build that up.
There is the on-dock rail expansion, which means, for a gal who has no clue,
this is really important. Think of all these big ships that come to the Port of Los Angeles. About a third of the cargo stays here in Southern California. We've got 20 million of us that go to the store every day and buy a lot of products. Another third goes out to the Inland Empire, to that large warehousing and distribution district that we have. 2 billion square feet of property under roof where we reassemble goods and ship them out to the rest of the country. the most important market right now that we talk about is that intact box that comes from China that goes to Chicago, Memphis, Dallas, and beyond. These distribution centers in the interior of the country are very important to us. They can go to any other port in the country and still get to Chicago. We want those containers coming through here. So over the past 2 decades, we've built a rail network that allows us to unload a container from a ship, put it directly onto a rail car, and get to one of those 14 distribution centers faster than anybody can do it. More recently, we've built 6 miles of new rail track on our causeway in the Port of Los Angeles, 5 new rail sidings, a bridge, and a gateway now, which expands the opportunity for us to handle even more rail cargo to the interior of the country. Truly a game changer in our industry.
And along those lines, a lot of technology and a lot of AI has been incorporated into the system. And I know that there's also that impacts the workforce, et cetera, but there is a program that is robustly helping any kind of workforce transitions that might have to take place. Is that not true?
Yes, absolutely. A couple things here. Technology is moving faster in our port and supply chain industry than ever before, but the city and Port of Los Angeles have one guiding light, and that is we cannot leave the workforce behind. So we, along with our neighbors at the Port of Long Beach, are building right now the nation's first goods movement training campus, the first of its kind in the United States to help train up young people for the next generation of worker and people my vintage that need to be upskilled or reskilled into today's technology and that of the future. That's the goal here. Keep building the best and the brightest talent. The institutional knowledge here in our port business is second to none worldwide, but we have to stay on that cutting edge. We've also got groundbreaking information technology that's helping us move our cargo faster and more efficiently than ever before. The Port Optimizer, co-developed with the Wabtec company, now allows us to see cargo coming in 40 days before the vessel comes to Los Angeles. Wow. That in and of itself helps us plan that skilled labor, the land, and the machinery for any change in the cargo movement. And lastly, one of the biggest pieces here, and it's a little bit of a polarizing conversation, robotics at ports. Automated machinery that moves containers, maybe at a lower cost, maybe more hours of the day. Here again, we don't have to have separate conversations about our dock workers and those robotics. They have to go hand in hand to improve efficiency, but we have to continue to be a jobs creator here in Southern California.
Along those lines, the port is not only an opportunity for us to have goods, but it's also an opportunity for people to enjoy cruises, because it's become a very important and vibrant part of the cruise industry, which has grown and grown and grown. There is expansion on the horizon in that regard, is there not, with another opportunity for another area for cruise ships to come in and people to depart from?
Yeah, this is also super important, Maria. Our Port of Los Angeles has never been busier, safer, cleaner, or more enjoyable to visit than it is today. With the cruise business coming back so strong after COVID-19, last year we had 1.3 million passengers come through the Port of LA, 229 cruise departures. We've decided that we've got to stay ahead of these industry trends. And we recently put a proposal out to the market for a new cruise terminal at the outer harbor of the Port of Los Angeles. Much like airplanes and the cargo ships, these cruise vessels are getting bigger than ever. 5,000 passengers now on some of the elite cruise ships. And the investment from the private sector is really coming in fast. So we need to be nimble, be able to handle these larger ships, and deliver an experience to the passenger like no other. So that bid is out on the street now. We believe that we're going to have great interest from the private sector cruise industries, the investment community, and others to start building out this cruise facility. The cruise terminal downtown, for those of you that enjoy television, was the home port for the Love Boat on ABC for so many years. And if you watch the opening and closing credits, you will see berths 92 and 93 in that iconic television show. But now is the time where we need to expand. Every cruise ship that comes to the Port of Los Angeles means more than $1 million to our local economy within 2 miles of the port. The hotels, the shops, the restaurants all benefit from our tourism in Los Angeles.
But sometimes growth is painful, and projects take a while, and sometimes they're a little frightening. I will going to mention there's a project to fix and repair and to solidify the Vincent Thomas Bridge. It's such a critical route from A to B, but fixing it's going to be a little bit tough. I mean, Council Member McCosker has actually nicknamed it Harborgeddon. How do you think this is going to play out? Because it's imperative, but it's also a little bit of a breath holder.
In the port business, we have terminology like other agencies, safety first. The Vincent Thomas Bridge was completed in 1961. Today, it handles more than 50,000 vehicles, commercial, industrial, passenger cars, school buses for our children. Safety first is our belief. It will need to be resurfaced, the Vincent Thomas Bridge, and that means closure, partial closure. People are going to have to take different routes to work and school, and it's going to be painful for most of us.
Right.
But we cannot afford to have any problems with that bridge being a key connector for jobs, education, and cargo flow. So we're working very closely with the California Transportation Secretary, Tokes Omashakin, a good friend of this port and city, who has come to our aid on many occasions, including the fire under the 10 freeway just last year that Mayor Bass and so many others worked around the clock to get back up and running. Secretary Omashakin has been on the ground with us to understand exactly what closure or partial closure could mean to all of the citizenry around the South Bay area and in the Harbor District. So we've got ideas about how we can do this, creating an opportunity for cargo and passengers to move in alternative routes, fixing up roads ahead of time so that passage is safe as well, and trying to get through this resurfacing project as quickly as possible. No final determination has been made by the California Secretary's office, but I am hopeful we'll reach a conclusion to share with the public soon so we can get their feedback and make sure that we're all moving in the same direction. It's going to be a tough one. A lot of people are not going to be happy, myself included, because we're going to have to take different paths to do our work every day. But getting this bridge back to a state of great repair and making sure that the citizens of Los Angeles and our visitors have safe passage is job number one for us.
Well, you mentioned safety first, and obviously we've seen if we don't care for our ports and what happens, obviously the tragedy with the Key Bridge in Maryland, we end up suffering for a longer period of time. What safeguards are in our port that something like what happened to the Francis Scott Key Bridge would never happen here?
Yeah, Maria, a friend of mine back in Washington says that if we've seen one port, we've seen one port. Although some of us look very similar, we're all different in various ways. The tragedy that happened in Baltimore is etched in our minds forever. And those loss of lives of those 6 workers could have been avoided. There's an ongoing federal investigation, and we'll let that play out appropriately. But here in Los Angeles, we like to look at our operations through our head of public safety and Port Police Chief Tom Gazy as not having one single source of failure, no matter what that is. So every container vessel that comes into our port, we have a minimum of 2 tugboats and a maximum of 4 escorting that ship in and out of the port. If, for example, a ship loses power, those tugs can steer and stop that vessel in the main channel. Secondly, our bridge, the Vincent Thomas, is a suspension bridge, different from the truss constructed bridge in Baltimore, meaning that the legs of the bridge are on land here in Los Angeles in the enclave of San Pedro. Second to that, Dina Arian-Zalen, who heads up our engineering bureau, has built up rock formations close to those legs to make sure that if a ship did veer off course, that rock formation would stop the vessel before it even came close to the land side or the legs of that bridge. And then lastly, after the tragic events in Baltimore, Chief Gazy and I did a top to bottom review of all of our safety protocol with respect to ships, landside and waterside operations. In conjunction with the Marine Exchange, the United States Coast Guard, and other authorities, we continue to fine-tune that safety protocol every day.
Wow. We've been talking about, not only the container ships and the cruise ships, but there's also an opportunity for folks to enjoy the waterfront and what the port has to offer, even if you're a resident of Los Angeles and you're not heading out on a cruise, to just go down there. And there's lots of activities down there, and it's a destination for families and guests to enjoy. What are some of the things that you're most proud of, that you're very happy that the port offers anyone who would like to enjoy that area?
Public access.
Yeah.
What cooler idea than to have families and friends enjoy the waterfront and get close to the busiest port in the Western Hemisphere and see all of those ships coming in, the container work, the great longshore members moving this cargo throughout the country. So what we've done, back in 2015, along with my coworker Mike Galvin, we created what we now call the Public Access Investment Plan. It was our investment into public access and the waterfront community that was going to drive change at the Port of Los Angeles. 10% of our port's operating income goes directly to those waterfront projects. Today, with the West Harbor Complex, Jericho Development, the Rakovich Company, are going to open up in the fourth quarter of 2025 a brand new retail, dining, and entertainment experience. We're also studying the possibility of building a 5,000 to 7,000 seat amphitheater directly adjacent to the West Harbor Complex. Can you imagine music shows and other events for families and friends alike right next to famous restaurants overlooking this great port? So our work continued earlier this year during Lunar New Year's celebration, opening up the Wilmington Waterfront Promenade. That $77 million project brings our community closer to the waterfront in Wilmington, and now today, that enclave of Wilmington has received more investment from the Port of Los Angeles than any other in the Harbor District.
That's exciting.
So it keeps us running to work every day, but there are more opportunities for both public and private sector investment for enjoyment of all to see.
I was going to say, because you listed some pretty robust goals at the beginning of the year that you wanted for the port. It sounds like we've talked about several of them and how far they've moved. Anything else that I have overlooked at this moment?
No, but one thing that deserves a little bit of amplification, if you will, is that we've always thought that if the community is successful, the port will be.
Sure.
And if the port achieves success, it's shared with the entire community. 260,000 residents live in the 1-5 district of Councilman Tim McCosker. It's an awesome responsibility, but it's been so great to see what's happened. Earlier this year, we kicked off our summer festivities with Fleet Week. And we welcomed the aircraft carrier, the USS Carl Vinson. We had so many folks coming down to take tours, and it lasted during the course of the Memorial Day holiday. Very thoughtful to remember those who came before us and offered the ultimate sacrifice for our freedom, and to celebrate with enlisted men and women today, to share how much we care about them was just inspiring. Following that, we had our Juneteenth celebration. Cars and Stripes Forever, a great classic car show down at the harbor. And then for the 4th of July, we had our first ever Olguin drone show, 500 drones, which is much more environmentally friendly than fireworks. We took a chance because fireworks are a passion of many of us in Los Angeles, but 500 drones and a light show that just lit up the southern Los Angeles skies. Tremendous event. Later this summer, we'll have some more programmatic activities and continuing free boat tours for the public and for school kids alike to come out and see this port up close. It truly has been a fantastic summer so far, and more to come for the balance of the year.
Where is the port when it comes to environmental issues? Because there have been some concerns raised. Where's your focus, and what is it that you are really leaning into when it comes to the stewardship of that area from an environmental standpoint?
This is work that has to happen every day, and much like a newscaster, an actor, even a golfer, you never reach perfection. You're always working your craft every day, and that's what we believe on the environmental side of our business. Along with our neighbors at the Port of Long Beach, back in 2006, we put in the first ever Clean Air Action Plan to reduce emissions while growing cargo and jobs. To this point, we've cut diesel pollution 90%. Now, to get after that last 10 percentage points, we have an aspiration to be the first ever zero emission port complex in Long Beach and Los Angeles. This is the tallest mountain we'll ever climb. We're working very closely with the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power to bring in as much electricity as we need to go to this battery electric environment. Led by our own head of business development for the state of California, Dee Dee Myers, we've earned one of 7 hydrogen hub designations by the United States Department of Energy. To produce, transport, and use green hydrogen for industrial sectors like the port is on our radar now too. So to try to migrate from fossil fuels to zero and renewable technologies is the goal at hand. We're the only port complex in the world to have on paper date-specific goals of 2030 for port operations and 2035 for heavy-duty truck movement to become zero emissions, the only in the world. But we can't do it alone. We need the best and the brightest engineers and scientists. We need private sector investment. And right now, with the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, we have nearly a $500 million application for funding in front of that agency. We hope to hear the answer from the evaluators in the fourth quarter of this year. And if we're right, we're going to be able to accelerate the investment in this clean technology and reduce pollution and health risk for our neighbors exponentially.
How much does what happens in Washington, D.C. affect the Port of Los Angeles?
The election in November will shape the future and landscape of the Port of Los Angeles, and for this one reason. On one side, you've got campaign talk about levying 10% tariffs on all $3 trillion worth of American imports, 60% tariffs on imports coming from China and Mexico. That would decimate this port. It would create more inflation for the American family. We have to focus on trade because if we're trading with people, there are probably going to be less disputes. We do have to protect American interests, and I understand that, but we're inextricably linked with overseas trade. We buy, consume more than any other nation. We also produce more than anyone else. Our agriculture products, the American farmer, rancher, grower counts on those overseas markets to sell their crops. We have to continue to promote that. For every 4 containers we bring to the Port of Los Angeles, we create 1 job. This is very powerful. We try to continue to build up the cargo flow because it does create jobs and economic opportunities for our families. And at the same time, we're going to do it in a sustainable, environmentally sensitive way. We've got to keep propelling down this path. And that's why it's so troubling to hear this rhetoric around tariffs that will really, really change the way we do business.
So much to follow. It has to be more often that we have this conversation because I have learned an enormous amount and I am really engaged by what you are doing down there. So if I am not alone in my feelings, how can people find out what's happening? Because it seems that it's an incredibly robust trajectory that deserves our attention.
Oh, thanks, Maria. There is so much good happening. And when I go out to lunch with customers or I'm visiting with our neighbors, everybody's really excited about all the progress at the Port of Los Angeles. You can look on our website at lawaterfront.org to see more about all these amazing activities and waterfront development we have. And also go to the portoflosangeles.org to see all the fresh statistics about how much cargo is coming through, the jobs we're creating. And there's also great content that's on that, from press conferences that we do monthly to active engagements with community members, thought leaders, and folks from our neighborhoods talking about what the port means to them. So there's a lot out there for our viewers to see. And again, a big thanks to Channel 35. Every 2 weeks at our board meetings, the staff is down there so we can broadcast all the happenings of the Port of LA to the citizens of Los Angeles. We're forever grateful for the work that you do.
Oh, and we're grateful for you as well. Thank you so much, Gene. It's been wonderful chatting with you.
Great to see you again, Maria. Thank you.
Thank you. And that's a wrap on this LA Currents. I have to say, you brought up so many issues.